Hello and welcome to Headlines. With reports on high-stake back-channel US-Russia talks on Ukraine increasing in intensity and in terms of the degree of official validity ascribed to them, the question is whether what is described by many as a battle of endurance between Moscow and Kiev, propped up by the West, could now enter a stage of de-escalation. Moscow, in the person of Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov, has openly admitted that its diplomatic contacts with Washington have recently intensified, with some unofficial yet somewhat credible reports emanating from the United States media seemingly suggesting the self-same. At the same time, President Trump has recently stated that he is open to supplying Ukraine with more weapons in exchange for access to the country's mineral resources, giving rise to some suggestions that, after all, they could potentially be the way forward, enabling Kiev to sustain its efforts. As the United States and Russia are reportedly exploring the ways to end the war in Ukraine, the latter is facing the task of recalibrating in the midst of global power dynamics. For Ukraine, the Trump effect probably means both opportunities and risks. There is an opportunity to end the active phase of the conflict. On the other hand, there is a risk of Ukraine's sovereignty becoming a bargaining chip in a larger geopolitical transaction. Will Ukraine's riches help it overcome its current gargantuan challenges? Is Trump's transactional approach to dealing with intricate and intractable problems going to backfire for Ukraine or save it? Today I'm joined by Hanna Hopka of International Center for Ukrainian Victory and Nunuvanu Martinj, a geopolitologist and consultant on EU affairs. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Hanna, my first question is going to be to you. 3 days ago, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that Ukraine is closer to peace than ever before, emphasizing that the country as a whole must do everything to ensure that life in Ukraine stabilizes and that all Ukrainians have peace. The facts on the ground, on the battlefield, do not favor Ukraine at this juncture. What kind of peace could there be?
Thank you so much for these important questions and covering Ukraine, because I think it's in the interest of all of us. First, Putin doesn't want peace, and actually he wants a pause, operational pause, to rearm, regroup, and redirect his aggression, including the eastern flank of NATO. All the talks about negotiations or some sort of deal, this is the way for Russia to divide our Western partners. And actually, it's a trap. Let's be frank, because I do remember 2014, when Russia invaded Ukraine from illegal annexation of Crimea and how the occupation started. And as a former chairwoman of the Foreign Relations Committee, 2014-2019, I remember Western naivety. When our partners believed in peaceful settlement, they really thought that through political diplomatic means, we can reach a ceasefire. Remember Minsk I, Minsk II agreement. And let's be frank, from 2014 to 2022, when Russia started a full-scale war, actually, Russia is committing genocide against Ukrainians. So within these 8 years of peaceful settlement, from 2014 to 2022, we've never seen a long-lasting ceasefire. So do you really believe that Putin wants peace? Never. And why? Because now Russia is not acting alone. Russia already formed, institutionalized the axis of tyrannies, or we call them four horses of apocalypse. And just recently we presented at the European Parliament our report with key lessons learned from Ukraine, especially countering the axis of evil warfare alliance. Lessons from Ukraine and challenges for European security. So it's a trap. And Russian KGB-style diplomacy knows how to play this diplomatic game in their favor, in their benefit. So instead of increasing pressure on Russia, when now Russian economy is weaker, And we see many problems inside Russia, conflict between different elites, siloviki, military, also other guys between regions, also situation with inflation. So Russia is vulnerable now. So for Trump, for his and for American image as a leader of superpower, they need to demonstrate their strengths. So strength is not to follow the trap. Don't make a bad deal. This is our call, because Russia will seize this momentum first to weaken sanctions and to restore its economy and to prepare for new escalation or attack, not hybrid attack, but real attack on NATO or other countries, or they have Iran, North Korea, China, or they could use Belarus, because within these 11 years of Russian aggression against Ukraine, de-sovereignization of Belarus happened. So for us, it should be very clear that it's in American interest to see Russian defeat, right, like Assad regime in Iran.
Nuno, Hannah Hopke believes that Russia is not interested in achieving peace. In fact, it is a trap, and Trump should show his character and apply more pressure on Russia. And any deal that these two countries may agree upon will be a bad deal. President Zelensky also stated that excluding Ukraine from US-Russian talks on ending the war would be very dangerous. How worried Ukrainians should be about the possibility of some external decision being imposed on them, and could they in principle rely on Americans?
Please, thank you very much for the invitation and for the interesting debate. Look, I do believe you have to understand that the situation in Ukraine is very clear. The only partner the Ukrainians have in order to fight the Russians is, unfortunately for the Europeans, the United States of America, because they have been the ones on the front of helping. Europeans, they have helped, but not as fast as they promised, not as much as they promised. There is a lot of discussions about that help as well. And this created a lot of complications, also because the Europeans have the idea of sustaining this effort, financial and military, with the freezing assets of the sanctions that we have in the European continent. Saying this, it is clear that with the victory of Donald Trump and the new president-elect president of the United States, that the situation vis-a-vis Ukraine and the Russian is changed a little bit. Change because Trump is willing to end the war and the conflict on one hand, and second, because he's willing to discuss directly with Putin. So taking that into consideration, the question is exactly what is going to happen in a foreseen peace deal. I don't think that necessarily the Russians are against peace. The question is not about that. The question is about what type of peace we are looking for. Meaning, is peace meaning that Ukraine will continue with the total amount of its territory, one, or is Ukraine giving some territory to the Russians, second? And if we are talking about this territory, which territory are we talking about? Are we talking about Crimea? Are we talking about Donbass? So this is questions that will be on the table. And to be very honest, I don't think that there is another solution than, at the end of the day, Ukraine is not going to give up certain parts of its own territory to the Russian Federation. So this is my view. I think also that the problem is very much a double-sized problem, in the sense that this is a historical problem, because it's a problem that started at the end of the Second World War, where certain parts of the European territory were given to the then Soviet Union, including parts in Ukraine and including parts in what it is today, the border with the Baltic states. I'm talking about Kaliningrad, the former Königsberg, which was Germany before, on one hand. On the second hand, the idea of appeasing the Soviet Union, that was always a discussion in the European countries, and always a discussion between what to do, supporting the Americans or trying to achieve peace deal with the Soviet Union. This has been always on the table in different European countries, especially France and Germany. And this has been, this just changed with the fall of the Soviet Union. So the question today is, in my view, I don't think that, to be honest, Russia is a very strong player. I think the biggest problem the US has is China. So then the question how Russia depends a certain amount of on China, because what happened with the sanctions in Europe, what happened with the shift of the Russian economic policies towards different markets because of the war in Ukraine. This has an implication on how much the current administration, US administration, wants to bring Russia more on its side and to counteract China. So that's I think, the real challenge here on one hand. On the other hand, it will be interesting to see what President Zelensky means by accepting the deal of the mineral resources of Ukraine and what America wants, what the American administration wants. And it is going to be interesting to see if Ukraine holds elections, who will be the candidates and who is going to win those elections.
Hannah, quite a number of things to explore here. And Nunu said that there must be some compromise from Ukraine. And what do you make of Donald Trump's transactional approach to dealing with problems and finding solutions when it comes to Ukraine in particular? He has recently suggested, and Nunu alluded to that in return for gaining access to Ukraine's rare earth minerals, he could supply your country with weapons. And what do you make of this moment? Does it actually happen to be in line with President Zelensky's victory plan?
So first of all, without Russian defeat, to make America great again is impossible. Let me explain why. Because for US credibility globally, they need Ukrainian victory. Because victory in Ukraine, it means a powerful signal to China. So the United States, they need Europe, they need Ukraine to deter Chinese ambitions in Indo-Pacific region. So this is why we have to work together. And all this 5% of GDP that Trump requested from NATO countries should be implemented, this contribution. Also, European Union should confiscate 300 billion of Russian sovereign assets, demonstrating their leadership, that they are not always just looking into White House and expecting security umbrella. So they are also paying, contributing. So this is really important. What Russia wants, of course, Putin wants a new Yalta to shape a new world order, just Russia and America or probably China. This is unacceptable to European Union because they want Russia and China to kick US out from Europe and to weaken both. So I think it's really important that for United States, NATO and the European countries which are in NATO, they could strengthen leadership of the US. Also, all unique technologies that Ukraine already obtained, including our startups in drone production. So it's not like 10 years ago when Russia sent green men to Crimea, when started its occupation. The war dramatically changed. It's electronic warfare. There are many robots already in the battlefield, evacuating wounded soldiers, drones attacking with deep strikes inside Russia. So believe me, there is some unique experience that only Ukraine has, and even NATO countries like US and others, they don't have it. So this is the value, the asset of Ukraine that we will bring to the table. And as I mentioned at the beginning, Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, they institutionalize their cooperation, cybersecurity, sharing intelligence data, military exercise, joint drills, also new military agreement, trade, exchange of technologies. So it's happening, and happening in much faster way that some Europeans debating about tariffs, they are losing the understanding what is at stake. So our mission and our role is to explain that to make America great again means Russian defeat. And we have our famous motto, make Russia small again. You know, our famous T-shirt, we are spreading worldwide, we are supporting indigenous...
Sorry, Anna, I have to ask you this question. What does make Russia small again actually mean? Could you explain that?
So Russia has this ambitions to become a new empire when the Soviet Union collapsed. Remember when Putin said this is the biggest geopolitical tragedy
of the 20th century.
So, if you look from Moscow, the size of Moscow and now Russian Federation. So Putin publicly stated that he is afraid that inside Russia there are more than 200 conflicts with territorial claims. So he is afraid that of Russian disintegration as one of the scenario. So, and also remember what's happened with the Chechen's Republic, when Soviet Union collapsed. When they proclaimed independence, they faced a genocide, two Chechens war. And I think it's really important to explain that we have to, besides Russian military defeat, regime change, to talk about Russian de-imperialization, Russian decolonization. This is what we try to explain, because current Russian Federation, it's the same like Soviet Union, when captive nations were facing genocide like Ukraine, Holodomor, man-made famine organized by Stalin. This genocidal practice of Russian imperialism should be end finally. Never again Russia should attack any sovereign nation.
Allow me to put you this question. Hannah Hopke explained her vision, the way she, the organization she represents, and I imagine quite a considerable amount of people in Ukraine feel about what should be done. She said that de-imperialization of Russia. She said that it is within the best interest of the West to achieve the complete defeat for Russia, so a complete victory for Ukraine, consequently. Do you find her assessment of the situation realistic?
Look, it's very interesting, that question. It's very interesting what Hannah said. I have to say that some of parts of what she said, there are two things. It's not about disagreeing or agreeing. It's about understanding why she's saying that, because understanding where she's coming from, her own perspective in saying that. And this I can accept. What I don't disagree, and it's because in my view, I have, in my opinion, a more realistic way is to see Ukraine and the Ukrainian-Russian war right now for the Americans as in a holistic way. Everything is on the table and everything is on the table for the same reason. The Panama Canal, Canada, and Greenland, for instance, they are, and also Gaza, they are all on the table for the same reason, which is, in my view, a war between the United States and China. First. Second, what Anna says goes exactly against the doctrine of the 19th century that we saw in Europe, where the majority of European countries developed empires all over the world globally. In my view, we are seeing exactly the opposite. In my view, the American administration trying to fight China is necessarily adapting and modernizing what is called the Monroe Doctrine, meaning, first, everything linked to the American continent, both North and South, has to be done with and by the American administration. And this is not exactly what we are seeing. Secondly, as I said before, the Americans and the Biden administration, one of his last acts was to go to Angola to promote the so-called Lobito Corridor. This is exactly a step towards the fight against the China dominance and the Chinese program of the Belt and Road Initiative. So what we are seeing here is the Americans clearly trying to create a fight against China for exactly what Anna said regarding technologies, mineral resources, basically artificial intelligence, basically the future of humankind. So that's where I disagree with that. I think Ukraine is part of the whole, it's a part of this war. It's not the war essentially. Basically, this is my view, and this is what I can summarize about the question you just made.
Hannah, if I've understood Nuno correctly on the basis of the answers that he has provided during the course of the interview, he believes that some compromise from Ukraine will be needed. My question to you, and you explained your vision in the clearest possible way. You even said that the future dismemberment of Russian Federation is indeed a distinct possibility when you were replying to my previous questions. But at this juncture, early 2025, could you, as a country, rely on United States? And how worried are you that at this juncture, some sort of deal could be agreed between Russia and Trump, and that could be imposed on Ukraine, making the subject of the territorial integrity, sovereignty of Ukraine, a matter of transaction? Are you worried about this possibility? And do you think Ukraine is perfectly entitled and justified in relying on United States at this moment in history?
Very important questions. Let me inform you. 64% of Ukrainians believe that Ukraine should not accept any negotiations without real security guarantees. This is what Ukrainians learn within 11 years of aggression. So no deal without security guarantees. And here, United States should also, as a security guarantor, when Ukraine gave up the third largest nuclear arsenal in the world after Soviet Union collapsed. So it's really important also for Trump provide security guarantees that Russia will not start a new aggression against Ukraine during his second term, because this would be very damaging of the image of American strength and Trump also. So this is why I think security guarantees should be discussed, and there are several options what could be a security guarantees for Ukraine. Because now Ukraine not being a member of NATO, but we are real security guarantor for eastern flank of NATO, because we are defending Europe and NATO European countries. Let's be honest. Remember a year ago when there was some official statements from Russian Federation telling that they want to redraw the maritime borders in Baltic Sea. So Russian imperialistic ambitions will always go through their territories, trying to grab more and more territories. But this war is not about territorial concessions. The war is about destroying the Western rules-based order, and actually by building axis of evil alliance to shape a new one. So this is why the defeat of Europe, United States, and bad deal, because bad deal will be considered as a capitulation of the West instead of demonstrating strength. This is what Putin wants. He wants that United States and Trump, with his readiness to end the war within 100 days or half a year, he followed the trap, and then the evil will be in details. When they started to blame Ukraine, started to blame the EU and all these issues. So instead of talking that Putin is a war criminal, and there is International Criminal Court, the international, how it's called, arrest warrant. So I think it's, when we are talking about territorial concessions, let me remind you, when Russia started its aggression in 2014, I heard from some people in different international events telling me, Hanna, forget about Crimea. Look, give up Crimea and Putin will stop. Or why do you need Donbass back? Forget about Donetsk and Lugansk Oblast. And you will see that Putin finally will be satisfied. And I tried to explain that, guys, are you naive or you don't understand what is really behind the Russian aggression against Ukraine? Putin doesn't want Crimea. I remember when my daughter was 4 years old and I was already in the parliament, and she asked me a question, Mom, Ukraine and Crimea is so small and Russia is so big. Why Putin grabbed Crimea? Why he needed it? So this is what we have to explain, that following the trap of negotiations and agreeing on some concessions, compromises, you are following the Russian game. Instead of demonstrating strength, imposing tougher sanctions, and actually making Russian economic isolation with the blockade of the trade in the Black Sea, Nordic Sea, with more tougher sanctions, this is the right way to go. And when Putin and his circle will understand that the price for not withdrawing from Ukraine is reaching the moment when Putin is losing everything and Russia will be on the brink of collapse, maybe this would be the momentum when Putin will consider negotiations as a serious one, not as a trap for Trump and other divide and rule approach.
This for Hanna Hopka of International Center for Ukrainian Victory, who joined from Kiev, Ukraine, and Nunu Vanu Martinch, a geopolitologist and consultant on EU affairs, who joined from Brussels. See you very soon.